I'm John Hall. This is Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. Davin and Kellan Bartosch of Acre Brewing Company are here to talk about brotherly suds, respecting beer history, and managing growth. But first, I'm happy to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Bull-Eyed Communications. Do you have the right messages in place to make your brewery stand out in a crowded field? Are you executing with trusted partners who know the beer industry? Are you receiving the right counsel? Bull-Eyed Communications is a creative and strategic marketing agency with decades of experience working with some of the biggest names in beer and consumer products. Bull-Eyed Communications offers a wide range of marketing services to satisfied customers, including positioning, sales collateral and POS, branding, website design, public relations, and social media. Talk with Bull-Eyed Communications today on how they can get your brewery and beer to stand out to audiences that matter. You can visit them online at bulleyeddcommunications.com or call them directly at 973-975-3037. You already make great beer. Let Bull-Eyed Communications help with the rest. And be sure to check out beeredge.com for articles, to subscribe to the newsletter, and to get episodes of the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch. We're also on social media at The Beer Edge. And yes, we've expanded our This Week in Rausch Beer offerings. Not only do we have the Facebook group, you can search This Week in Rausch Beer, but we also have Twitter and Instagram accounts. Get Rauschy with us at TW Rausch Beer. So I have family in Middle Tennessee, and we get down there, or at least we did, a few times a year. And every time I'm in Nashville, I keep meaning to drive west to Memphis to take in the music, the food, and the beer. Wiseacre has definitely helped define that city's beer scene over the last decade, and they're doing it with a nod towards an appreciation for history, education, and smart growth. Since I just couldn't wait to get down there in person, I called up the brothers, Davin and Kellan Bartosch, to talk about their beers and a sense of place, and we quickly got sidetracked. In asking how they like to be identified as part of the brewery, Kellan, the younger brother, is director of marketing, although he calls himself captain of industry and teller of tales. And even though he has the education and the background to call himself a brewmaster, Davin chafes a little bit at that title, calling himself the head brewer instead. The conversation picks up there, midstream, with Davin explaining his rationale behind what he likes to be called. The brothers spoke to me from the brewery in Memphis.
Just like anything, it's almost like the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. So to me, I feel like saying you're the master of anything is just basically admitting that you're an idiot because you're not to the end,
Yeah. So you just prefer head brewer then?
Yeah, I really am just not into titles altogether.
It can be bad.
Yeah, it can be bad. I don't know. I don't like being boxed in.
What do you think that's born from?
I think it just in some degrees it stifles creativity, and it also, I think, in a lot of ways, it prevents people from looking out for other parts of, the business, or just looking out for what's going on around you. You're like, oh, I'm just going to stay in my lane here, and even though I might have a better idea about how something else could be done, I'm just going to shut up about it because, that's my title doesn't grant me authority over there.
I had about 5 or 6 opening questions that I really wanted to start with, but you talking about stifling creativity. We're in such this interesting part of beer right now where it seems like there isn't a ton of innovation that's happening, or like at least original innovation that's happening. It's somebody does something cool and then everybody sort of rushes to follow. And, years ago, I spoke to Tommy Arthur of Lost Abbey after he won the Russell Shearer Award for innovation. And he was really sort of banging this drum of like, what are the true new paths forward? Not just the treads that somebody else has walked, but where can you forge your own path? And I'm curious for the both of you of where are you finding inspiration for creativity these days?
Jamba Juice.
Is that because we're recording early in the morning, or is this?
No, slushies.
Slushy IPA.
I'm being silly. Sorry.
Fine. It's sarcasm is easier when we do these things in person. But yeah, that's fine.
For sure. I think, there's something to be said for having other creative people around you, for sure. And I feel like a lot of people that get into working in breweries, get into it because they want to have a creative outlet as well. God knows none of us got into this for the pay.
What are you talking about, man? I'm in journalism. I'm raking it in.
Right.
I make tens of dollars a week.
So, I think it's that's a big part of it. My brother and I have German heritage, and I think whether it's misplaced or not, I think I derive a lot of my interest in brewing from that side. It was brief, but I went to brewing school in Germany for a while, and I like German beer culture a lot. I feel like it's mostly based on kind of a volume type of drinking, more so than nobody's ever smashed in Germany except for tourists. It's all a very social beverage, where but very flavorful, but very drinkable. So I think that's kind of where I tend to gravitate.
I don't know about creativity. I think the pendulum is kind of swinging back and forth a lot, and it's tough because you got to ultimately we're a business too, and we have to make good decisions. And I guess it's the chicken and the egg thing of what's driving our industry. Is it consumers or is it brewers? And I think it's always both. But I would say Davin, certainly doesn't want to let the cart lead the horse, and I think that's a good thing. But maybe what we're seeing some recently is that we've always made Tiny Bomb for 8 years, and that's our best-selling beer by far. But there's some excitement that we're seeing from some of the more simple things that we're doing. Like being out in Colorado, and we've got a Belgian Wit coming out as a seasonal, and then we're getting into Oktoberfest when the fall comes around, and then an amber ale. And, our distributor out there and the retailers were so excited because I think there's some fatigue of all of the hazy IPAs and all of the fruited sours. It's thank God, it's an amber ale. You know what I mean? That wasn't exciting a couple of years ago, but when people, I was kind of showing them what we were up to in 2021, people were like, yes, an amber ale. I was kind of taken aback a little bit, but I think for us, we see amber ale as super important, in the American craft beer scene, especially in the 90s and 2000s, it was a exciting beer, and because people, mostly had American adjunct lagers, and now it's sweet. It's just classic American craft beer style. We don't see it anymore.
And that's true. And I've asked other people that on this show recently, and in other conversations. Do you think the pandemic has helped with that, of people being at home and just sort of looking for stability or familiarity, or just something that's, I don't know, when you're thinking about your 2021 calendar, did the pandemic influence it?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. We maybe, I think maybe early on, and I'm certainly guilty of this personally too. People were didn't know what to do, so probably drank a little bit extra. Mm-hmm. And so we did make some kind of stronger IPAs. Not that we're want to be a part of somebody's downfall or something like that, but people were stressed. And, I think when, used properly, obviously booze can be a good thing as a tension reliever or something like that. And that's proven by health experts. I'm not trying to just espouse booze. It's obviously dangerous.
Oh yeah.
For some
no,
people.
9 out of 10 doctors recommend a double IPA.
Well, a glass of wine, people always think of that as I read this book a couple of years ago, The Blue Zones of Happiness. And that's one of the top 15 things in the world that makes people happy. He calls it the author called it wine at 5, but he was really like, it's, really just alcohol as, a social lubricant and a stress reliever. Like, get together with your friends, have a drink.
Mm-hmm. And don't have 5.
Yeah. Anyway, all I had to say, I think we did make a couple stronger IPAs during this time, but or not just IPAs, but some stronger beers. We made a Doppelbock a couple times as well, but outside of that, no.
Let me back up a little bit, because you were talking about culture, you're talking about heritage, you're talking about, other people sort of leading the way. And the two of you had a beer journey together very early on. There's a great section of your website that I'll encourage people to go and look at, because not only does it have a really cool map on there, but it sort of explains out your story, at least through the 2013 or thereabouts. But there's a footnote in here that together you guys stole your parents' rental car and you drove to the Sam Adams Brewery while you were still in high school. Did you actually take a tour, or did you just like stand outside and take a picture and then go home?
Yeah, we took the tour. My dad worked for Federal Express, and he was on a business trip to Boston.
Yeah, before it was FedEx, Federal Express.
Okay.
And he was on a business trip to Boston, and one of those things where you've got a hotel room, so you just take the family anyway.
Yeah.
And so we were all there, and he was in a meeting, and he took the train to the meeting or whatever, and so Kellan and I just took the keys to the rental car and went down there, and we were. What's crazy to me now is I don't know how we found any of this stuff, because it was like pre-internet.
Yeah, I mean 97. Yeah. Your
I don't
dial-up
know how we found
AOL
it.
to get through to www.
We probably just like went and asked the hotel.
The Yellow Pages,
Yeah, just went and asked the hotel concierge how to get there or something.
I guess so, but 30 Germania Street is not easy to find. Like, it's not an intuitive place to have a brewery in the middle of houses in a neighborhood.
Right.
But either way, you made it there. Okay.
Yeah, so we drove there and took the tour, and it was fun.
It's a lot of coercion. I mean, I don't know who we met kind of outside in the parking lot, but I was 15, but I recollect Davin doing the talking, a lot of like mind games of just let us get in and look around. It's come on, no one's going to know, and it's not a big deal, and whatever. And I was the nervous 15-year-old, and there we went.
Yeah, but a couple of free samples of that cherry wheat, and it just puts you right at ease.
Man, we used to drink that in high school all the time. It was like Sierra Nevada Pale, Sam Cherry Wheat, Pete's Wicked.
Yeah,
that honey porter too. I used to be all over that honey porter.
Peach Strawberry Blonde.
Oh yeah, no, I mean they were all great beer. I mean, here on the East Coast, we had Magic Hat number 9 as well. That was sort of in there.
Yeah.
With cherry wheat and a few others. But what I'm interested about is that, so this was clearly a formative thing for you guys because you've put it in your bio together. And then, Davin, you start home brewing when you're in college. You guys travel some more for beer, and eventually you get it in your head that you want to have a career in beer, be it through writing, be it through education. And I guess what I'm most intrigued about is at some point, brothers' interests differ. So when was there like a cohesive moment for you two when you decided that you wanted to do this together, that there was equal amounts of passion to go into this, and somebody else just didn't go into insurance or join the family business at Federal Express?
Yeah, so I think it all started off as like a hobby kind of thing for me, and a lot of it was, I'm just kind of a cheap person in general. I figured out that I could make a case of beer for a lot less than I could buy it for. So that was kind of my that was like my introduction to brewing. but then pretty quickly after that, I found out that I could make way better tasting beer for less money as well. And I was not really interested in turning my hobby into a business. But I mean, the idea to really make it our life's work was Kellan's, not mine. And there was definitely some cajoling that had to occur for me to kind of come around on the idea. And I think I'm a good deal more. I think I'm very skeptical by nature. So, I said, well, yeah, if we're going to do this, we're going to make sure that we get a lot of training in our respective fields. And, I was really going to make sure I drug it out.
Kellan, where did you see the promise of starting your own thing then? And I mean, if your brother was doing the beer making, was it just an entrepreneurial spirit in you? What was the...
I think that's the short answer, but I think the long answer is that it's the story of our lives. Davin is my older brother, but not by much. I mean, less than 2 years. And he had always been just, when he chose to focus on something, he was great at it. And I think it kind of drove my parents nuts at times, because if he didn't like something, he just wouldn't try. If there's a certain subject in school, and he had a interview with Harvard because he had good test scores, but he was also a C student, and really good test scores, I should say. But, growing up, he was really good at chess. He was really good at racquetball. He went to cooking camp, and he would, find these unique things that off the beaten path where he could kind of do them by himself and focus and get great at them. So I think as his brother, I knew there was greatness in him, and he was homebrewing, starting really his freshman year of college in the late 90s. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so he didn't really either. And he had bounced around a couple jobs. And I guess he was working at Kinko's, but he's still homebrewing a lot. So anybody who hears this in their mid-20s,
so you did join the FedEx family.
Yeah, and I did insurance before that. So you basically nailed it.
But,
let nobody say I don't do my research before I do one of these interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, this went a little too far. I'm kind of nervous.
Right. But, I guess no one really knows what they want to do when they get out of college usually.
Yeah.
And he was homebrewing. So it was a couple months of I realized David, you got to make this homebrewing thing. You make it your career, because you're not going to find an office job that's going to make you happy. And then after a couple months, I was I don't know what I want to do either. And that's where the entrepreneurial spirit came in. I was we can figure this out and do all the things. And so Davin, kind of came back with, well, I need to go to brewing school. Home brewing is not enough. And then, I got a job with a beer distributor, and I was going to grad school, and, Davin finished with brewing school, and he's that's just theoretical. I need some practical experience. And then he started doing it, and he was I have so much more to learn. And I think Davin would still be saying, I still have so much more to learn, if we hadn't just decided to pull the trigger one day. But yeah.
What strikes me as interesting is the way that you went around to other breweries, and you visited other breweries, and you had conversations, and you sort of gleaned a lot from people who came before you, some of the early pioneers, or even just some of the innovators that were out there. And again, I feel like on these shows these days, I'm really being the cranky old man. And I think it's just because I've been housebound for too long and I need to get back out and see the world again. But I've talked to a lot of brewers that have opened up in the last couple of years, and it's oh yeah, I did a 6-week internship somewhere, and I just, so I'm ready to open up. And I think that's probably to their detriment. When you all were talking with folks early on, was it market research? Was it just for your own edification? Was it with the idea of, okay, here's what works and here's how we could do it? Or was it really just to sort of be, I don't know, good students of beer?
I think it was all of the above.
Okay.
And I think certainly, for our own edification, our dad, really taught us to find joy in learning, whatever it is. And we'd make fun of him for it growing up, but I think he was able to pass it on. And so, a lot of these other breweries are heroes of ours. And so certainly inspirations too. And it's like, if you listen to, bands or something, like it's a good thing if somebody's influenced by, both Led Zeppelin and Neil Young or something like that. And like, you can't just do it without any reference to, what, paved the path for you. And so there was, I think, kind of all the above of like wanting to learn and wanting to pay homage and wanting to get good experience all at the same time.
More with the Bartosch brothers in just a moment, but first, I'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, Bolide Communications. It's a creative and strategic marketing consultancy with decades of experience working with some of the biggest names in beer and consumer products. Talk with Bolide Communications today on how they can get your brewery and beer to stand out to audiences that matter. Visit them online at bolidecommunications.com or call them at 973-975-3037. And now, back to Kellan and Davin Bartosch of Acre in Memphis.
It's definitely been I would say it's mostly educational reasons, but beyond that, it's a good time. It's fun stuff to do with your brother.
Well, maybe, yeah. And the alternative is that similar to the curmudgeonness that you were expressing in yourself. Like you read an article and it's like, someone on a 6-week internship, or like, oh, this accountant followed their passion for beer to open up a brewery, and people applaud it. But I always think about like, what if, it's like Davin and Kellan's passion for tax, and they open an accounting firm. Like, we would be terrible accountants, but for some reason, like, passion seems like it's enough for people in beer. And that just seems silly to me. Like, you need to get good at something. Like, if you expect it to work well, and you need to understand like some history around it and study other people that have done it before, like, you don't, decide your passion for heart surgery and just get to, perform open heart surgery. Like, you have to go to medical school to learn about it. And then you shadow a doctor and whatever. Like, so we felt like that was, the right path, and the alternative always seems disappointing to me on paper. There's some people that are able to pull it off, I think, but a lot of times it's like they're not taking this seriously. And it is beer. It should be fun, but like, it should be taken seriously.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also a business, and the bigger you get, the more you have to think about, not just yourselves and your family, but also your employees and their families, and, your responsibility to the consumer. And I mean, there's, heavy is the head that wears the crown, for a lot of breweries, I think. What do you see as the hardest part of the job these days? I'll let either of you jump in on that.
I mean, the pandemic is its own set of things, and I mean, I think it's making it just hard for everybody around the world, and I think taking a toll on people, just the lack of ability to really interact and celebrate and connect with people is just a lot tougher. But that part of it aside, because I feel like should be a given to most people that are listening to this or reading this. I think we have a lot of ways to improve just as a business, and dealing with people. Like, when you make a big plan for this business you're going to open one day, you just don't think about people and growing, like, how that all works. And so you have to plan just the same way you had to plan to be good at making beer and selling beer and all that kind of stuff. You have to plan to be good with people and be able to show them growth personally as well. And you're kind of budgeting and planning for business, but you need to think about people too. So I think we've learned a lot on that front, and that's still probably the biggest challenge. And I think we've gotten better. I hope we're getting better over time too.
Yeah.
And I would mostly agree with Kellan, but also add that we're operating 2 breweries now, and just facilities management is just getting it's getting pretty wild. I feel like more often, more days something breaks than days everything runs perfectly. So I would just say that there's a whole lot of chasing down how to do things the best way that you possibly can.
Yeah. So Let's talk about expansion for a minute, because this is something that I've always been intrigued about over the years of covering beer, of when it makes sense to add new locations or when it makes sense to grow or open up new markets. And it's different for every brewery. And ultimately it comes down to a little bit of faith, but a lot of smarts and a lot of proper groundwork and good planning. What was the original plan for the brewery, and how wildly different is it today?
We did have a plan, but I also feel like, once you kind of get started, there's a whole different, I don't know if this analogy works, but just like a different line of dominoes than you anticipated. And once that first one starts to fall, there is a lot of kind of reacting. I think you need to be prepared to react. So, we were very intentional about the building that we found or ended up getting. Davin was still making beer in Chicago, and I was driving around town looking at buildings, and we found one that, we thought we could grow into for a while. And, so did all the equipment selection. I mean, trying to think about growth and all that kind of stuff. But really, in the first year, I think we made 3,000 barrels. And then we made 9,000 barrels, and then 16,000 barrels, and then 19. And so that was, the first year, 2013, was really half a year. So in about 3.5 years, we had maxed out the whole building, and we had offsite storage, and we basically had plateaued, making about 20,000 barrels, selling beer in 9 states, and we couldn't do anything else at that point because we needed a new facility. We couldn't really add new beers because that would be taking away from a beer that we were already trying to keep up with. And I really just skipped ahead a lot there, but that's kind of, that was the short story of our original facility is let's grow into this, for 10 years. And it took us, 3.5 years. And so, but I guess once we started that path to growth, we bought a row of 80 barrel tanks, and we hired some folks that moved here from Montana and Chicago, experienced production people, and then it took off. And I think anything that we had on paper before we opened was just well, forget that. This is what we're doing now, because the opportunity was there. Yeah, the tap room was kind of a funny part too, and I think that's another interesting part of our industry right now is that the two of us, we very much thought of ourselves as a production brewery. And if you think about, the places we were going to visit and what a brewery tap room was, there's a lot of people now, and even though they're opening a brewery, I think what they're really opening in their head is a tap room. It certainly can be a viable business. And I think on a local level, there's ways to find success opening a tap room, but we closed at 8:00, for the first couple of years, and we were open 3 days a week. We weren't trying to be, some kind of massive destination. We wanted to be a production brewery. And that part of it, we thought we'd just be in there, talking to a handful of people and pouring them beers. But the whole world of tap rooms exploded, and people were excited to go to them. And so that piece of the business grew quickly for us too, in a way that we hadn't anticipated. We thought we'd just be, talking about beer and until 8:00 at night.
Yeah. And I think, when we first started talking about, getting on this path, that, nobody was opening breweries. There were very, very few breweries in general. So I think we had to have a really strong kind of plan with, some longer term implications, because, in 2003, you had a better chance of playing in the NBA than operating a brewery, just from a sheer numbers standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. I gave up my very promising career as a power forward to write about beer for a living. So yeah.
Yes, I remember. You declined
High
the draft
five,
workout.
Hall. Yeah, exactly. I want to jump back just a little bit though, because you mentioned David, when you were in Chicago, or I guess Kellan mentioned when you were there, and you were at Rock Bottom, and that brewery chain, I don't think gets enough credit for how influential it's been with laying down a foundation of, at least your generation of American brewers. And I'm guessing you're a member of the Order of the Black Phoenix, the former
Yeah.
brewers of, okay. Which for those who don't know, it's this not so secret anymore society of brewers that spent time at Rock Bottom. But when you were starting off and you were there in, I guess, like what, 08, 09, around then,
Yeah.
you had this whole network of brewers that came before you that you could sort of rely on. And it's been this tight-knit community. I know from viewing it from a distance. Is there something that exists these days, or like, and I'm not asking for you to reveal the new secret society, but is there still a need for a similar network like then, or
I mean,
has social media sort of, and text messages and DMs and all of that sort of changed the nature of what that original group was?
I mean, I think the need is that need is always there. But I think in large part it's just sort of gone. And I would say that I mean, I had a huge roster of very experienced brewers that I could ask questions of, and especially like old school Rock Bottom. And I say that, like when I started working for Rock Bottom, there was no recipe that we had to follow for anything. And in all honesty, I think they were kind of nuts. But it really allowed brewers at individual locations to completely, either just sink to the bottom or swim like a crazy person if they wanted to. And they gave us what we needed to succeed without getting in our way. Basically the mantra was, if it sells, you did a good job. That was kind of that was really like all that mattered to some degree. I mean, you had to have something light and drinkable on tap. That was,
of course,
but it wasn't. It wasn't. No one was trying to tell you had to use this malt or anything like that. I definitely wouldn't be the brewer that I am without having worked at Rock Bottom, but also just the Chicago brewing scene. Around that time was incredible. So I feel like I had a lot of folks to bounce ideas off of, and people that had been in it quite a bit longer than I was, that could critique and offer very honest, unbiased opinions about things that each other were making. So I don't know. It was a magical time for me.
Yeah, I mean, so leaving Chicago, going to Memphis, which did not have a great craft beer scene, let's say, when you all opened up, was it weird sort of being the oasis?
Yeah,
was it
yeah, it was very strange. And I mean, I would routinely, I would still call people in Chicago and ask them, here's what's going on. And I don't know are you familiar with John Laffler from Off Color?
Yeah.
So I just, he and I would talk, sometimes, but not a whole bunch. And then, one day I just called him and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And he was like, at the end of the phone call, he was like, why are you calling me? Like, we you never called me when we were in Chicago. And I was like, yeah, but we used to see each other all the time. So it was kind of
I'm not down the street anymore. Yeah.
Right. It was kind of a funny, like, change of, a change of our friendship, because it was like, now we just kind of have to talk on the phone because I'm not in Chicago all the time.
I know about beer, but I'm not a brewer and don't have that training. And so I think Davin was really missing those peers when he was here. And I couldn't provide that level of expertise, but I'm just chiming in because I think when I saw Lafleur, I'd met him, like going to visit Davin, and he told me about that phone call, and he said like he hung up and he was like, am I Davin's best friend? Like, I didn't think Davin and I were that close, but I think
maybe we are.
Davin said it was a magical time, and they all, it was Lafleur, Tim Marshall was a solemn oath, and Jared Rubin, he was still a goose at the time, I think, making all these food beers, and certainly Matt Gallagher from Half Acre, but they all had this incredible mutual respect, and they didn't want to copy each other at all. I think was a really unique part of it too. Everybody kind of had their different things they were great at, and the mutual respect and like admiration and like love that all those guys had for each other in that time, I think was pretty special. But he certainly was missing, having peers when he in Memphis, and maybe when we opened up.
Yeah, and I felt like everybody was, because of our, kind of our influence on each other. Everybody was just making incredible beer. It was just super exciting to me. I mean, have you ever been to Peace in Chicago?
Oh yeah, of course. It's a wonderful brew pub. Yeah, and some of the best pizza in town, actually. But yeah,
it's great pizza. But John Cutler's beers are just freaking incredible. And being there also kind of influenced me a bunch, just because like you can't even see the brewery in that place. Like it doesn't. I mean, there is an incredible brewery there, but you just wouldn't even know it was there. It kind of shaped my ideas on what that could be as well.
What do you mean by
you
that?
You can win people over with beers. They don't even have to see the fact that it doesn't have to be a show, because Rock Bottom's a show.
Yeah, but I mean, so many breweries are designed that way as well. I mean, I've always found that to sort of be charming about breweries, with maybe the exception of, what was it? There's the brewery that's at Epcot Center in Disney, where Rich Michael was, and there's a few other guys who were there, where they were like made to mash in at 7:00 at night for the dinner crowd, so that people could actually like see the process, and it was like being in a show. That's the only place that I've heard where it's not, where the brewers like really kind of hated it. But having it behind the scenes, though, that there's an appeal to that. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the appeal is just winning over customers without it being like, oh, it's a brewery. It's just like, oh, this is delicious beer, and I'm going to come back for it again. It's fine to me that it all happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's happening. The production is happening behind the scenes, but you all focused quite a bit on education, and everybody who's there is pretty knowledgeable and is eager to get the word out and explain flavors and explain processes and ingredients and all of that. I mean,
yeah, I think a lot of that was a decision that we made, just knowing that we were both coming from places that were like very almost like beer centric, and I should say like different beer centric. I mean, I think Memphis is a very beer centric place, but there's a pretty strong BMC hold on Memphis.
Yeah.
So we knew that we were going to have to do a lot of educating.
There's a pretty terrible Netflix show that made 2020 even worse last year called Bruce Brothers. And it was all about, two brothers getting involved in a brewery. And I hope you guys didn't see it, because it was just,
I haven't seen it.
It's just fucking awful. I mean, it's just, there's no good redeeming factors of that show. But it did bring up sort of this dynamic of what is it like having two brothers who are close, responsible for the same business. And we've obviously seen other brother duos or trios set up and do quite well. Kurt and Rob Widmer early on, the Henler brothers up at Jack's Abbey, to name a modern example and a past example. Were there conversations that you all had early on of separating family from business, or is that just an impossible task?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of an impossible task, but I would say that it's kind of a saving grace too, because we ultimately have to respond to being brothers before it's even a business, I think. And, we were a family way before we were a brewery. So I think those, at least I think to both of us, those things always come first. And we might get in arguments about the business, but at the end of the day, we're still brothers who love each other, and it's not, the business can only get in the way for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's mostly a strength. I think there's times where I don't think we speak in code, but we can understand each other in ways that maybe sometimes we have to over communicate to staff to make sure they get it. But I think early on, our dad was super about it. And we kind of had went to lunch with him and we're like, here's what we want to do. And we shook hands and stuff. And my mom was like, don't do it. Don't start the business. I can't imagine my sons, having something like this go between them. And I understand that, because that would be awful now that I have kids to think about. But, it's all intertwined. And we called each other this morning on the way into work, and it's oh, hey, here's what my son did this weekend. And then what the hell is going on with, such and such in production? And then it's well, haha. And, here's what we did this weekend. And it all kind of goes together. But I think we have, pretty clearly drawn lines, and there's ultimate trust too. So, I guess the two things that I think of is that we have total trust that we're doing the right thing for the business and not for selfish reasons, which can be tough. And I think we also, we know how to communicate with each other, at least on a conflict resolution.
Okay.
We can get through it real quickly. We can be brutally honest with each other and use bad words, but also know that it doesn't, it doesn't matter. 2 minutes later, we're friends and we're laughing again, but we can get through challenging stuff. And I think that helps the business, because there's always production and sales kind of back and forth, but we're able to kind of get through those things and move forward.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's, if you're going to do it, that sounds like you guys went in with your eyes wide open and are making it work. Earlier on, you mentioned your father was pushing you to find the joy in learning, and I'm mindful of your time. And so as we're starting to wrap up here, where are you finding joy in learning these days? And I'm asking that of both of you.
I think mine is a lot of it is just the continued trying to get a better understanding of kind of business management and people management, and how to help people get along with one another and understand one another, which it's not a traditional book education. It's more just life experience and seeing how things work out. That's what I would say.
You really like cooking.
I love cooking.
I am reading a book around the subject Davin was talking about, and it's the kind of stuff that I feel when I was younger, probably when we were younger, we would have made fun of. But, our business is something that we care about, and the people here we care about. And so, I think you've got to try to continue to grow and change personally and as a business. And so that becomes a fun endeavor to read, books and try to get better at other parts of the business that we, weren't really focused on when we opened up. So I don't know if you were talking about business or personal.
No,
but I think it's been important.
I didn't have any sort of particular. I liked that was sort of your dad's advice. Find the joy in learning and whatever that entails. Yeah.
Oh, he really just lived it too. He would it's just natural for him. He's like a big kid. He had a good career. He's not immature, but he finds joy in life, and he'd sit there and read the encyclopedia growing up and be like, look at this. And, it was all about fun for him and joy. So I think for me, it's been important to like kind of find some distinction. I think it was the first couple of years that really felt like there were blurry lines between like me and the business, and I think it's important that there's like some separation. Like I have a family, and that's important, and being able to have interests and hobbies, like started riding a bike and stuff like that more. And like, so it's fun to learn about bikes and like, just to spend time that's like not just beer, but just, don't let the business consume you and become your identity. Like you have to have a separate thing that makes you who you are.
Yeah. Like Jamba Juice.
Yeah. That's what we're doing next is we're already moving on.
Sorry, you were being all sincere. You're being all nice. You're talking about your dad. You're, having nice, fond memories. And then I just come and drop an old joke. So, yeah, sorry.
It's a good joke, though. I mean, I can't, because people just text us and email us like anything they see about beer all the time. And some, a friend of mine was like, this thing's pretty good. And I was like, why don't you just go to Jamba Juice and pour some vodka in it? Because that's, it's the lines between beer and they're really blurry right now. And it's fine if that thing tastes good, but it just doesn't really seem like beer, Is
that the type of stuff that you're texting your best friend, John Lafler, that he should be doing slushy beers?
He does some crazy stuff.
He
that is still beer, and it's still delicious.
Yeah.
I had some blueberry skin something or other last time I was up there, and it was incredible. He does like all the low ABV, full of flavor.
Oh, I love
stuff,
drinking his beer.
And,
yeah, no, it's I'm definitely a fan. Well, guys, thanks for taking the time this morning and talking with me. I mean, I know we could go on for hours and hours, and I hope you'll come back again so we can go deeper into some of the beers that you guys are making, and all of the charitable work and all of the other stuff that you guys are doing that I had written down that we just weren't able to get to today. And hopefully 2 shots in the arm, I'll be able to come and visit you all in person. But thanks for doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
My thanks to Davin and Kellan for being on the show, and be sure to check out Wiseacre online and certainly in person when you can, and see if you can find their beers in a growing number of states. Consult your local beer shop for the offerings. Who do you want to hear on the show? Tell me through email. I'm John Hall. It's JOHNHOLL @beeredge.com, or John_Hall on Twitter. And be sure to check out beeredge.com for articles, to subscribe to the newsletter, and to get episodes of the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch. We're also on social media at The Beer Edge. And don't forget, Steal This Beer every Monday at 5 o'clock, and the BYO Nano podcast with new episodes on the 15th of every month. And yes, we have expanded our This Week in Rausch Beer offerings. Not only do we have the Facebook group, but we also have Twitter and Instagram accounts that are sorely neglected at this point, but I'm going to get better at it. Get Rauschy with us at TW Rausch Beer. And if you're interested in advertising, we have surprisingly affordable rates, and we'd love to tell you more. You can reach out directly to Liz Melby. She's out on email at liz@beeredge.com. And speaking of advertising, we are grateful for this episode's sponsor, Bolide Communications. Do you have the right messages in place to make your brewery stand out in a crowded field? Are you executing with trusted partners who know the beer industry? Are you receiving the right counsel? Bolide Communications is a creative and strategic marketing consultancy with decades of experience working with some of the biggest names in beer and consumer products. Bolide Communications offers a wide range of marketing services to satisfied customers, including positioning, sales collateral and POS, branding, website design, public relations, and social media. Talk with Bolide Communications today on how they can get your brewery and beer to stand out to audiences that matter. Visit them online at bolidecommunications.com or call them directly at 973-975-3037. You already make great beer. Let Bolide Communications help with the rest. That's it for this week. Nate Schweber does the music. Jeff Quinn designed the logo. Remember to defend Pilsner. I'm John Hall. New episodes of this show release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.